So Warner Brothers is in full press panic mode when it comes to the DC brand. They are freaking out. They are freaking out openly. And you know what? People are starting to take notice. They're starting to question things like overexposure. The fact that creator-owned comics and crowdfunding are dominating, and oh so much more. You can see them panicking real time too. And the fascinating thing about this, they're not even hiding it anymore. They're doing it right out in the open. Why? Because they have problems. Serious problems. You and I, we're going to talk about that today. Fun times, huh? Fun times indeed. So hey there to all you fine folks on this fine day, by the way. I hope you are doing excellently. And if you would, one thing. We have our third independent comic book coming soon. Sign-ups at the top of the description. Check that out. More on the end of the video. Thank you in advance. So the panic coming from Warner Brothers has seeped out into the open. I've talked about it behind the scenes time and again from sources. I always find it funny, too, because they're professionals. They like to deny it. Well, look at articles like this. DC Comics in rebuilding mode. Top execs, so their big guns are actually coming out, speaking out on this, saying they're trying to quote-unquote future-proof publishing. Now, a lot of people, they have no idea just how much panic there is when it comes to Warner Brothers, and ineptitude at that. Well, let me show you something. This, I think it really says something here. Former Activision esports executive Daniel Cherry III was hired as Senior VP and General Manager of DC Comics in September, taking on the business aspects at the company. They brought in a guy that didn't know anything about comics whatsoever. Why? Because the people that know stuff about comic books, they were failing. They were failing miserably. And the panic move was, well, anybody has got to be better than this. The panic, though, it reaches much, much further down than this. If you look at this portion here, for example, it reminds you that almost a year ago, DC Comics was hit with a brutal cut that saw 1/3 of its comic ranks wiped out due to broad layoffs at the parent company, Warner Media. 1/3 of the company was laid off. That's right. They thought so poorly of what was going on. They were having so many problems. They got rid of 33% of their staff. Now, the thing that truly fascinates me about all of those moves is that despite all of that noise, despite bringing in new people, despite saying that things are going to change, they won't admit what the problem is. They just do more of the same. They partner up with Fortnite, for example. You can see that esports stuff coming in, and that, it does well at first. It does really well at first, but that's not sustainable. You're not going to go in, you're not going to bring a lot of people to comic books, and they say that, too. Challenges remain amidst criticism that Warner doesn't get the comic book publishing world, and that's true. They don't get it at all. They think they can go in and add in a Black Batman, for example, and presto manifesto. That's going to work out. In fact, that's pretty much been the game plan going forward. They're not going to admit what the problems are. They never do that. The solution, though, it's to create more Batman titles. Even that Fortnite title we mentioned there, yeah, you know who that had attached to it? Batman, of course, because that's going to fix everything, right? This article from Screen Rant, though, it brings up that problem, it points a spotlight at it, and Warner, they can't ignore this forever. Why DC's overexposure of Batman creates problems. Listen to the beginning of this, by the way. I mean, this is truly telling here. The second week of August, so this is just 1 week, saw DC Comics releasing 9 Batman-related titles. 9 Batman-related titles 1 week in August. I mean, that's not fixing anything. That's just basically taking something, that's dumping it into the market, hoping that thing works out. And that's all done while ignoring the proverbial elephant in the room. You know, those 2/3 of people that you should have gotten rid of, you could have gotten rid of, but you didn't. Here's a comic pro, for example. I'm just picking a random one out of there. Doesn't really matter who they work for. Almost all of them are just like this. Here's Dan Slott big name in comic books. Look what he's saying to do here. If a rando shows up in your replies and says something awful, by the way, awful, that means anything that you disagree with, apparently, don't respond. You're giving them what they want, attention and a boost. Instead of responding, look at their timeline. Find something reportable and report them. It's better than a response and might lock their account. So, people that would look up a Dan Slott, people that are probably customers in the comic book realm, you don't like what they say, you don't like who they follow, don't respond to them. Basically, hunt down posts you think might take them out and try to destroy them, because that's what these folks do. And that is what Dan Slott does, by the way. See, I brought this up before, and I think this bears repeating. These folks, these comic book pros, they think they're the ones that make industry work. Here's Mark Waid, for example, talking about block botting, or blocking tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of customers or potential customers. He says, that's not a perfect solution. And yeah, sometimes it results in unfair situations where a genuinely civil fan can no longer follow a creator on social media, but that was a privilege to begin with, not a God-given right. It's not a God-given right to follow them. It's a privilege. There's somebody that you're privileged to interact with. I mean, think about the ego and narcissism that comes with a statement like that. That, in my opinion, is why things like this are popping up, too. And you know what? This increases the panic in the Warners and the Marvels. Why? Because creator-owned comics are on the rise. People like myself, we're putting out our own products. Why? Because the companies out there, they decided to make a move. They decided to say that the customer, they don't matter. Well, the customer, they don't want to walk away from comic books, but they want to walk away from those companies. So you know what? They start walking towards something, and they walk toward this right here. The move to creator-owned comics could be bad news for DC and Marvel. There are benefits to the comic book industry's increased focus on creator-owned comics, but also downsides for publishers like DC and Marvel Comics. Yeah, there are huge downsides. That is, they can't gatekeep the industry anymore. They can't say who makes something. They can't denigrate the customer and say, if you don't like it, just walk away from it all. Yeah, people have choices, and those choices, that's to opt out of places like Warner. Now, the most hilarious thing about all of this is while they're driving customers off by the droves, hardcore customers, I was one of those, by the way, they're talking things like this to do damage control. What is future proofing? Well, we talk a lot about the 4 R's. What's one of the 4 R's? Responsibility. Yeah, you might be talking about that with damage control, but you know what you're not doing? You're not putting it into play. These companies, they are done. They are done by their own hand. I love to watch them fall down, but you know what? I'll never go back to them, and I think people, they should walk away and find something new. But anyway, let me know what you think about that. As always, too, appreciate the heck out of you. Speaking of new, too, this is our new comic book coming up. Love that transition there, by the way. Third comic book, the link in the description. That's a sign up for a mailing list. If you sign up, you end up getting the comic book. You'll get an exclusive that way. Make sure you pick it up. This is how we maintain sponsor-free living. We talk about whatever we want. We're beholden to no one. And this is how you change industry. You can either sit around and complain about it forever, have it turn you off to the product, or you can create alternatives, and that's what we're doing. Check that out. And as always, like I said, I appreciate the heck out of you. I'm going to end there with a thank you and a see you soon.